you already know what time it is. It's your boy DJ RichieSkye back with some tea, interviews, recaps, and more. And be sure to check the links in the description of this video for trips, for books, one-on-one sessions, and more. Now let's get into the tea. Skye Squad, what is going on? We're back in the building, and we got to talk about Love and Marriage Huntsville Season 9 reunion. It is Season 9. I've been wondering what season it is for the past 5-6 months, okay? So we finally get some answers. It's Season 9, the reunion, Part 1, okay? Before we get into that, y'all make sure y'all are following me on the Snap, okay? Get onto the Snap with me. Get onto the Snap. Okay, I like Thanos. Get into it, baby. Follow me on the Snapchat, DJ RichieSkye, RichieSkye. Use the little thing in the corner of this video, scan it, all that stuff like that. If you are on this channel right now, if you're watching this video, I need you to go ahead and tap that like button, okay? Tap it like you was on Price is Right, all right? Tap it like you on Price is Right, and you about to win $100,000. Yeah, okay? Do it now. We're going to get into this reunion and what my thoughts are about it, of course. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel if you haven't already done so as well. So this episode of the reunion is called Arrest and Relaxation. Let's bring up a visual for you guys. Okay. Now, the episode, I'm going to read you the description. The cast gathers in LA for the reunion. Destiny has a wardrobe emergency. Martell faces off with Melody and the Scotts over the revenge P allegations. Carlos interrogates Maurice about his DUI. Kimmi confronts Melody over her infidelity insinuations. I think there's a part of my problem with this season and episode in general, and it says it in the description, is that there's an aspect of this show that in this particular season is dealing with revenge P. The fact that it's even in the description is problematic for me, because just the idea of that alone is it sounds like trauma. It sounds like trauma. It sounds like trauma. So for me, it's like it has veered into a realm of trauma as entertainment, and that's not entertaining to me. It's not entertaining to have to continue to discuss it either. So I'm sure it's just re-traumatizing for the people involved. You know what I'm saying? So I just, that right there, and I don't know how it was supposed to be done. I don't know the correct answer for this, because this is new territory for me as a reviewer, to have to deal with something of this nature when it's actually brought into the show by a particular character who is still on the show. So I don't really know what to do, you know? In any other situation, I don't know that person would have been brought back to the show. I'm not here to tell people who to hire and who to fire, but in terms of the level of what's happening, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, but I just know that as a reviewer, it's hard to recap. Furthermore, I'm going to say this. If you're the type of person that, you know, if you get, and I do say this, let me go back to something I've been saying much of the season. I try to observe this show and not absorb it, right? So for as much as I do state that it feels like trauma, I also can't absorb that trauma. Because at the end of the day, everybody has still at least up until this point, everybody was still involved with this show in some way, shape, or form. So if everybody signed on for it, then I can't be over here complaining about it. But as we also know, at this point in time, as of this week, you know, Melody has gone live. She's expressed her frustrations with the production, and she's also decided to leave the show, as we've also heard complaints from the Scotts as well, about production and not utilizing social media to produce the show, right? You know, their statements were, I know production is smarter than to use social media antics to produce our show. They also told us they were going into filming the very next week. So that at this point in time, they are into filming, as we have heard. So now what do we do now that we know the one of the main stars of the show has decided to leave? What do they do? Do they continue moving forward? Do they find someone else to replace her? How do they move forward? What will happen? I guess we will see. But again, this topic of Revenge P on a show that I'm trying to watch for my own entertainment is a tough sell for me. It's just tough. And I know it's tough for the audience. So I do want to caution you that while I acknowledge that this is tough to talk about, I would also encourage you to also take a step back from it and try to view this through the lens, at least my recap, through the lens of I'm going to observe this, but I'm not going to absorb and take it on personally. Because once you start to take these things on personally, then you start to let what happens on a show affect your life. And it should not do that. You can empathize, but you don't have to absorb it, right? And that's just where I'm at with it. So it feels healthy to me. So that's the way that I'm moving about it. And we'll see how I continue to feel moving forward. All right. So with that being said, let's get into the seating arrangement. It appears as though we have somewhat of a theme with like a gold, blue, white type of situation. I would have loved to know what Destiny's original dress would look like, and what color that would have been. I would imagine it would have been gold-ish, or maybe, yeah, probably gold, based on what we see here. Um, but it's I think she's giving more of a red look here, and this is the replacement dress, I believe. So I would have loved to know what she would have worn outside of this particular color right here, if that was the difference. I did try to give you guys a little bit of on theme, you know what I'm saying, with the blue and in the sweater vest. So, I try to, y'all know I like a little theme. I like to try to make this as fun as possible. So that's where we are with it. I do like these colors. I did think that, there was some standout looks for me. I felt like I love this blue on Melody. With the blonde, I'm typically not a Bob fan, but I feel like this works. I would have loved to see this without the cape, but otherwise the color is striking on her. I also have to say that Latisha looks absolutely amazing as well in this beaded white number right here. Again, not necessarily being a fan of the bob, but I feel like she pulled it off because it adds to the simplicity. It's simple in comparison to the complexity of the beaded ness of the gowns. In terms of, I like the construction of this jacket right here, and then I like the beading on Chris Fletcher's jacket. But what I feel like they should have done is, if he was going to keep that collar flipped, I think you needed some beading on the bottom, on the back side of the collar too, because otherwise it just looks like the collar's flipped up wrong. Here it looks fine, but when he stepped out on the stage to greet Carlos, it just looked like the collar needed to be down. So I see what they were going for. I might have also gone for a turtleneck. I'm a big fan of a turtleneck, only because that shirt feels a little bunched at the collar. So those would be some of my thoughts on the looks. All right, so let's get into the episode in and of itself. We start off the episode with an acknowledgement that Destiny, who was seated first chair, is back in action. She does say that they need to be thanking her, especially for the attention that the show has gotten with the inclusion of Sonny and Moses, the X's and the O's, and the people that was once maybe her friend or maybe not her friend, and I don't know, whoever they were, whatever they were to her producer and such. And so, yeah, I had to have me. Listen, it was a dry January. I had to have me a little something or other, to get me through. Okay. Little Johnny Walker. Okay. So anyway, we get into the first thing that we get into, honestly, is a situation where we have a package that's really about the Scotts and the Holts and how this show first started. And it's also, I think, where a lot of us fell in love with this show because it was these couples, who were, in real estate and they were building their businesses and they were like, just like we were seeing them as bosses, like build and grow. And I feel like to a certain degree, we've kind of gotten away from that just a bit. And we've gotten a lot more into the drama and scandal that it has become. And whether that's a situation that has been driven by social media, I really don't know. And I really can't say because I didn't watch the show when it first came on. The first season, I caught up in that for like in the second season, I caught up. Because I needed to know what everybody was talking about with this particular show and was it real, right? So I remember it being inspiring to me in terms of like even wanting to go and get my own real estate license because we were talking about Martell and this builder's license. And I said, well, I'm doing all this talking. I wonder if I could do it myself. Like, can I get this done? And I finally did. I mean, it took me a couple of tries, but I did, right? So, I just go back to that inspiration and I think, wow, like the show has come a really long way. And it was interesting to see the comparison because the question was asked about whether Martell really felt a certain type of way about seeing Marsau and Latisha, growing together versus what happened with him and Melody. And, he says that he doesn't begrudge them. He's not rooting for them either, but he doesn't begrudge them. And then they get into the Melody and Martell of it all. And really, we have to have a discussion about the Revenge P. And Marsau has to really interject to tell the story of what a lot of us heard and we're going to put alleged because they put alleged in the episode. But basically, we know that he sent the text message. I won't post the text message here. It's in the episode. You can see it for yourself. And we know that he sent a photo. He does admit that. Now, the interesting thing about this is there are a couple of things that happen. One, Melody lets us know that he pled guilty. Now, then Martell is kind of cagey about whether or not he did plead guilty. Melody then had to interpret for us that he's now in an appeal process. And then Marsau has to interpret for us what we now know as being him allegedly trying to get someone else to put this video out as evidence of Melody allegedly being with someone else. And so apparently, according to the episode, Marsau says that once he had a conversation with Mel about it and found out what was really happening, and they understood it from the person that told them about it as well. They claim to have not seen this video, but they have simply heard about it through this third party, and it was confirmed allegedly by Mel in at least this conversation here. That's what we get in the episode. Now, in terms of what Martell is saying, he is saying that this is not true, but the problem is, as it gets to the point where even Carlos has to like jump up out of his seat. Okay, he has to jump up out of his seat to try to get Martell to answer questions about whether you did or did not, and he finally has to chastise Martell and tell him that it is an abhorrent thing to do to send this message, because what you're not saying is that there is an implied threat of releasing it. Okay, that's what is not being said. Okay, that there is a seemingly implied threat that once you sent that message, it meant that you would put this out there to the people, coupled with what Marsau explained that furthered the narrative and further put the nail in the coffin that this was the alleged plot. So the fact that Carlos even has to get up out of his seat to have this conversation, to explain this, is very difficult. And even during the break, when the producer has to go and talk to Martell, there obviously are some legalities within this case that I don't know if he had to plead guilty in order to do this, to take this next step. I don't really know, and I don't understand it. And if it's that complicated and I can't understand it, I don't know that everybody else understands it either. All we know is that we don't feel like talking about this, and it sounds traumatizing. Not only for me, but definitely for Melody to have to sit there through that. Like, why are we even like it just that I think is the hardest part about this particular season. It really is. Um so then they get through that. There's also an issue between Latisha and Martell where she blames him for much of what they all experienced at the beginnings, when things really were at their height of the Scotts versus the Holts. She blames Martell for putting these notions in Melody's head and I'm assuming she meant Arion's head about them. I really don't know. So there's that moment of tension as well. I will say Carlos was extra shady this weekend. it was a lot of shade being thrown. Okay. But I also felt like there were also some things that, and we'll get into them, but this next topic comes up. And this was such a confusing segment for me that I don't understand what I saw. There's a part of me that does understand. Okay. At the end, after Carlos is, as they say, interrogates Maurice about his DUI, there is a point where Maurice just simply says, I'm going to follow the advice of my attorney and shut the heck up. And at that moment, I understood it, especially in light of where we know that situation is now. And that's the problem, I think, also with filming these reunions so early before the season is ended. I feel like these reunions need to be filmed once, like, at least I have to go like the Bravo route. To me makes more sense. A couple of weeks into but like right before we about to end filming, that's when we film the reunion. Because at this point, we're having to interrogate Maurice, but we already know the outcome. But now we go back to where they were during the day of. That leads to a lot of confusion, such that as Carlos is asking the questions, Kimmi and Maurice are like, it's like kind of doing the Matrix, right? And I guess for Kimmi, she felt the implication was one of us cheating. But in my mind, it would have been better to either just simply say right from the onset, it's very difficult for us to answer any questions about this because this is still a legal matter. So we're going to have to just let you either ask questions and just nod our heads because our attorneys would advise us to say nothing. So instead, what we get is this really intense standoff between Carlos and Kimmi, with Carlos asking a lot of questions. I mean, there was a lot of shade too, but a lot of questions, but there's not a lot of answers. And it felt like a lot of stonewalling. And I'm sure there's a reason, but I don't get it because the logistics of where Kimmi was in relation to where Maurice was, if it's Maurice versus the state of Alabama, it's not Kimmi and Maurice versus the state of Alabama. So I guess the question is, why not just answer the questions, especially Kimmi? Maurice, I can understand not answering the questions, perhaps, but Kimmi, I think just being able to simply say, well, this is what happened. I left. I was here with him then. I left then. I went home. I made a stop by the office. He stopped with me. But instead, I don't know. I still don't know what happened. And I don't even know that I would want to know. But now that the questions have been asked, I'm kind of like, well, what happened? I don't know. I'm confusion on it. At the end of the day, we know the outcome of the situation as it stands. So it sounds like everything worked out. But in the interim, there is still some residual feelings from Maurice and Kimmi about how Melody approached the situation. Now, the reunion is here to hash out those things. And so the things that happened during the season, I understand 2 points. I understand if Melody feels like we've had this conversation, we're cool. It wasn't that big of an issue. We squashed it, not like some of the other major issues that have happened. But I also understand the idea of when it happens, watching it play out on screen and then having to deal with it again now. I understand that, okay, we still need to hash this out, which then leads to Melody versus Kimmi, which in my mind, I remember Carlos saying to me when I asked him who was going to surprise me the most at the reunion, and it was Kimmi. And it definitely was Kimmi, right? And she definitely, I was like, oh, okay. Now this is new. Now this is a new development here, right? And I felt like what Kimmi was voicing was a frustration that perhaps she had been feeling for quite some time with regards to Mel. Because I do think that there's a little bit of a power dynamic on the show that kind of goes unspoken because Melody and Martell technically started this show. So I think that there has probably been a bit of deference, at least in terms of level of respect, in terms of, okay, they started this show. We kind of have to operate around them a little bit. But I also feel like Melody probably also feels like I was the isolated party in the divorce, which among a group of friends, I've often heard that this does happen. Like someone feels like they're on the outside, like they weren't the person that the friend group chose. And I feel like now she doesn't feel like she can trust them. So it is easier for her to simply do her job and show up and ask the questions. And I tell you guys in every episode, someone has to ask the questions. Someone has to do the reality TV work. As Melody stated in her live, she was doing the work. If anyone has to even if I'm a producer, I'm gonna have to say to someone, okay, so and so is not talking about this. Can you ask them about it? Because or someone is going to have to narrate this thing that is happening that we cannot escape as reality. And then that goes back to then even the revenge P of it all. Like, how do we discuss this reality that's happening? And how do we determine where the line is, where something is too dark for TV and entertainment? I really don't know because we are in a different territory now, right? But anyway, I say all that to say there's an aspect of this where Melody is doing her job. But there's also the human aspect of it where in doing your job, it's going to cause a ripple effect and somebody's going to be upset and somebody's going to confront you about it. It is what it is. That's what makes reality TV great. The red lipstick thing, with Maurice. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I didn't hear about it at the time. I had somebody tell me about it later, explain it to me when the episodes were airing, but I did not know about it. And I'm colorblind, so I mean, okay. Um, and Melody said it was in social media. Kimmi brings up something about a butt job. I hadn't heard anything about that either. Okay. Um, a lot of times, as a result of just my own experiences with the show, I just focus on the episodes. And unless something major, major, major happens, I try not to even get into it anymore. Of course, if the Scotts go live and they call out production, or they call out, they do something, or if Melody goes live and she, is called, it's something that big, it's inescapable. I can't help but talk about it. But these side things like the lipstick and the butt jobs, it like so anyway, I wonder where this will lead to next week. That's what I'm saying. I wonder how this is going to play out, because Melody was rather calm during all of this, when I thought she was, trying to explain herself. I think that Kimmi did feel a certain type of way about it all, especially probably watching it back. She probably felt a certain type of way, and I feel like this was an argument that could be had, and we can see where it goes. Because at the end of the day, I don't feel like, but honestly, knowing what I know now, it's like, now that we know that Melody's quit, it's kind of like, I guess, it goes nowhere. So I don't know. I don't know how to feel about it. Like, especially when a cast member has quit a show, it does make it kind of like, well, all of this kind of feels like irrelevant now. So I don't know. I don't really know what to think about it. Let me know what you guys thought about the episode. That's all I got for you guys for now. I would have liked to have done this live, but I do have a brunch today. So yeah. So here we are with a pre-record. So with that being said, make sure you guys follow the channel. Make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe, follow me on Snapchat. And with that being said, like I said, remember at the beginning of this video, try your hardest to observe and not absorb, so that you don't get caught up in just the wave of it all, okay? And you can easily watch the show and either go about your business or choose not to and feel fine, okay? But either way, hopefully you'll subscribe to the channel. With that being said, I will catch you in the next video.